Continuing with Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules for Life. This chapter, we're on rule number 7. Rule number 7, which is titled, Pursue what is meaningful, not what is expedient. It looks like the majority of this rule is summed up into this next section, titled The Delay of Gratification. I'm going to try to get through this in about 20 minutes. So if you have your book, go ahead and follow along. If not, it would be good to take out a pen and paper and take notes as I'm reading, because it would be kind of hard to keep up. The delay of gratification. When engaging in sacrifice, our forefathers began to act of what would be considered a proposition, if it were stated in words, that something better might be attained to the future by giving up something of value in the present. Recall, if you will, that the necessity for work is one of the curses placed by God upon Adam and his descendants in the consequences of original sin. Adam's waking in the fundamental constraints of his being, his vulnerability, his eventual death, is equivalent to the discovery of the future. The future, that's where you go to die, hopefully not too soon. Your demise might be staved off through work, through the sacrifice of the now to gain benefit later. It is for this reason, among others, no doubt, that the concept of sacrifice is introduced in the biblical chapters immediately following the drama of the fall. There is little difference between sacrifice and work. They are also both uniquely human. Sometimes animals act as if they were working, but they are really only following the dictates of their nature. Beavers build dams. They do so because they are beavers, and beavers build dams. They don't think, yeah, but I'd rather be on a beach in Mexico with my girlfriend while they're doing it. Prosaically, such sacrifice, work, is delay of gratification, but that's a very mundane phrase to describe something of such profound significance. The discovery that gratification could be delayed was simultaneously the discovery of time and, with it, casualty, at least the casualty force of voluntary human action. Long ago, in the dim midst of time, we began to realize that reality was structured as if it could be bargained with. We learn that behaving properly now, in the present, regulating our impulses, considering the plight of others, could bring rewards in the future. In a time and place that did not yet exist, we began to inhibit, control, and organize our immediate impulses so that we could stop interfering with other people and our future selves. Doing so is indistinguishable from organizing society. The discovery of the casual relationship between our effort today and the quality of tomorrow motivated the social contract, the organization that enables today's work to be stored reliably, mostly in the form of promises from others. Understanding is often acted out before it can be articulated, just as a child acts out what it means to be mother or father before being able to give a spoken account on what those roles mean. The act of making a ritual sacrifice to God was an early and sophisticated enactment of the idea of the usefulness of delay. There is a long conceptual journey between merely feasting hungrily and learning to set aside some extra meat, smoked by the fire, for the end of the day or for someone who isn't present. It takes a long time to learn to keep anything later for yourself or to share it with somebody else. And those are very much the same thing, as in the former case you are sharing with your future self. It is much easier and far more likely to selfishly and immediately wolf down everything in sight. There are similar long journeys between every leap in sophistication with regard to delay and conceptualization. Short-term sharing, storing away for the future, representation of that storage in the form of records and later in the form of currency, and ultimately the saving of money in a bank or other social institution. Some conceptualizations, for all the haters out there, had to serve as intermediaries, or the full range of practices and ideas surrounding sacrifice and work, and their representation could have never emerged. Our ancestors acted out a drama, a fiction. They personified the force that governs fate as a spirit that could be bargained with, traded with, as if it were another human being. And the amazing thing is that it worked. This was in part because the future is largely composed of other human beings, often precisely those who have watched and evaluated and appraised the tiniest details of your past behavior. It's not very far from that to God, sitting above on high, tracking your every move and writing it down for further reference in a big book. Here's a productive symbolic idea. The future is a judgmental father. That's a good start, but two additional archetypical foundational questions arose because of the discovery of sacrifice of work. Both have to do with the ultimate extension of the logic of work. which is sacrifice now to gain later. First question, what must be sacrificed? Small sacrifices may be sufficient to solve small, singular problems, but it is possible that larger, more comprehensive sacrifices might solve an array of large and complex problems all at the same time. That's harder, but it might be better. Adapting to the necessary discipline of medical school will, for example, fatally interfere with the licentiation lifestyle of a hardcore undergraduate party animal. Giving that up is a sacrifice, but a physician can, to paraphrase George W., really put food on his family. That's a lot of trouble dispensed with over a long period of time. So sacrifices are necessary to improve the future, and larger sacrifices can be better. Second question, set of related questions really. We've already established the basic principle. Sacrifice will improve the future, but a principle once established has to be fleshed out. Its full extension or significance has to be understood. What is implied by the idea that sacrifice will improve the future? In the most extreme and final of cases, where does that basic principle find its limits? We must ask, to begin, what would be the largest, most effective, most pleasing of all possible sacrifices? And then, how good might the best possible future be if the most effective sacrifice could be made? The biblical story of Cain and Abel, Adam and Eve's sons, immediately follow the story of the expulsion from paradise as mentioned previously. Cain and Abel are really the first humans, since their parents were made directly by God and not born in the standard manner. Cain and Abel live in history, not in Eden. They must work, they must make sacrifices to please God, and they do so with altar and proper ritual. But things get complicated. Abel's offerings please God, but Cain's do not. Abel is rewarded many times over, but Cain is not. It's not precisely clear why, although the text strongly hints that Cain's heart is just not in it. Maybe the quality of what Cain put forward was low. Maybe his spirit was begrudging, or maybe God was vexed for some secret reason of his own. And all of this is realistic, including the text's vagueness of explanation. Not all sacrifices are of equal quality. Furthermore, it often appears that sacrifices of apparently high quality are not rewarded with a better future. And it's not clear why. Why isn't God happy? Why would he have to change to make him so? Those are difficult questions, and everyone asks them all the time, even if they don't notice. Asking such questions is indistinguishable from thinking. The realization that pleasure could be usefully forestalled dawned on us with great difficulty. It runs absolutely contrary to our ancient fundamental animal instincts, which demand immediate satisfaction, particularly under conditions of deprivation, which are both inevitable and commonplace. And to complicate the matter, such delay only becomes useful when civilization has stabilized itself enough to guarantee the existence of the delayed reward in the future. If everything you save will be destroyed or worse, stolen, there is no point in saving. It is for this reason that a wolf will down 20 pounds of raw meat in a single meal. He isn't thinking, man, I hate it when I binge. I should have some of the food for the next week. So how was it that those two impossible, necessarily simultaneously accomplishments, delay and the stabilization of society into the future, could possibly have manifested themselves? Here is a developmental progression from animal to human. It's wrong, no doubt, in the details, but it's sufficiently correct for our purposes and theme. First, there is excess food. Large carcasses, mammoths, of often massive herbivores might provide that. We ate a lot of mammoths, maybe all of them. After a kill with a large animal, there's some left for later. That's accidental at first, but eventually the utility of for later starts to be appreciated. Some provisional notion of sacrifice develops at the same time. If I leave some, even if I want it now, I won't have to be hungry later. That provisional notion develops to the next level. If I leave some for later, I won't have to go hungry, and neither will those I care for. And then to the next. I can't possibly eat all this mammoth, but I can store the rest for too long either. Maybe I should feed some to other people. Maybe they'll remember and feed me some of their mammoth when they have some and I have none. Then I get some of the mammoth now and some mammoth later. That's a good deal. And maybe that those I'm sharing with will come to trust me more generally. Maybe that we could trade forever. And such a mammoth might become future mammoth, and future mammoth becomes personal reputation. That's the emergence of the social contract. It's probably basically pretty similar to how it went. To share does not mean to give away something you value and get nothing back. That is instead only what every child who refuses to share fears it means. To share means properly to initiate the process of a trade. A child who can't share, who can't trade, can't have any friends because having friends is a form of trade. Benjamin Franklin once suggested that a newcomer to a neighborhood has to ask a neighbor to do him a favor, citing an old maxim. He that has once done you a kindness will be more ready to do you another than he whom you yourself have obliged. In Franklin's opinion, asking someone for something, not too extreme obviously, was the most useful and immediate invitation to social interaction. So that people are always asking for a cup of sugar or something right when you move in somewhere, at least to me. Such asking on the part of the newcomer provides the neighbor with an opportunity to show him or herself as a good person as a first encounter. It also meant that the latter could now ask the former for a favor in return because of the debt incurred. Increasing their mutual familiarity and trust, in that manner both parties could overcome their natural hesitancy and mutual fear of the stranger. It is better to have something than nothing. It's better yet to share generously the something you have. It's better than that, however, to become widely known for generous sharing. That's something that lasts. That's something that's reliable. And, at this point of abstraction, we can observe how the groundwork for the conceptions reliable, honest, and generous had been laid. The basis for an articulated morality had been put in place. The productive, truthful sharer is the prototype for the good citizen and the good man. We can see in this manner how from the simple notion the leftovers are a good idea, the highest moral principle might emerge. It's as if something like the following happened as humanity developed. First were the endless tens of thousands and thousands of years prior to the emergence of written history and drama. During that time, the twin practices of delay and exchange begin to emerge, slowly and painfully. Then they become represented in metaphoric abstraction as rituals and tales of sacrifices told in a manner such as this. It's as if there is a powerful figure in the sky who sees all and is judging you. Giving up something you value seems to make him happy, and you don't want to make him happy because all hell breaks loose if you don't. And you want to make him happy because all hell breaks loose if you don't. So practice sacrificing and sharing until you become an expert at it, and then things will go well for you. No one said any of this, at least not so plainly and directly, but it was implicit in the practice in them in the stories. Action came first, as it had to, as the animals were once could act and could not think. Implicit, unrecognized value came first, as the actions that preceded thought embodied value but did not make the value explicit. People watched the successful succeed and the unsuccessful fail for thousands and thousands of years. We thought it over and drew a conclusion. The successful among us delayed gratification. The successful among us bargained with the future. A great idea begins to emerge, taking ever more clearly articulated form in ever more clearly articulated stories. What's the difference between the successful and the unsuccessful? The successful sacrifice, things get better. As the successful practice their sacrifices, the question becomes increasingly precise and simultaneously broader. What is the greater possible sacrifice for the greater possible good? And the answers become increasingly deeper and profound. The God of Western tradition, like so many gods, requires sacrifice. We have already examined why, but sometimes he goes even further. He demands not only sacrifice, but the sacrifice of precisely what is loved best. This is most strikingly portrayed and most confusingly evident in the story of Abraham and Isaac. Abraham, beloved of God, long wanting a son, and God promised him exactly that. After many delays and under the apparent impossible conditions of old age and a long barren wife, but not so long afterwards, with the miraculously born Isaac as still a child, God turns around and in an unreasonably and unapparent barbaric fashion demands that his faithful servant offer his son as a sacrifice. The story ends happily. God sends an angel to stay at Abraham's obedient hand and accepts a ram in Isaac's stead. That's a good thing, but it doesn't really address the issue at hand. Why is God's going further necessary? Why does life impose such demands? We'll start our analysis with a truism, stark, self-evident, and understated. Sometimes things do not go well. They seem to have much to do with the terrible nature of the world, with its plagues and its famines and its tyrannies and its betrayals. But here's the rub. Sometimes when things are not going well, it's not the world that's the cause. The cause is instead that which is currently most valued subjectively and personally. Why? Because the world is revealed to an intermediate degree through the template of your values. Much more on this in Rule 10. If the world you are seeing is not the world you want, therefore it's time to examine your values. It's time to rid yourself of your current presuppositions. It's time to let go. It might even be time to sacrifice what you love best so that you can become who you might become instead of staying who you are. There's an old and possibly apocryphal story about how to catch a monkey that illustrates this set of ideas very well. First, you must find a large and narrow-necked jar, just barely wide enough in diameter, just at the top for a monkey to put his head inside. Then you must fill the jar partway with rocks, so it is too heavy for a monkey to carry. Then you must scatter some treats attractive to the monkey near the jar to attract one, and put some more inside the jar. A monkey will come along, reach into the narrow opening, and grab while the grabbing's good. But now he won't be able to extract his fist, now full of treats, from the too narrow opening of the jar. Not without unclenching his hand, not without relinquishing what he already has. And that's just what he won't do. The monkey catcher can't just walk over to the jar and pick up the monkey. The animal will not sacrifice the part to preserve the whole. No, the monkey catcher can now just walk over to the jar and pick up the monkey. The animal will not sacrifice the part to preserve the whole. Something valuable given up ensures future prosperity. Something valuable sacrificed pleases the Lord. What is most valuable and best sacrifice, or what is at least embellic of that? A choice cut of meat, the best animal in a flock, a most valued possession? What's above that? Something intensely personal and painful to give up. That symbolized perhaps in God's insistence of circumcision as part of Abraham's sacrificial routine, where the part is offered symbolically to redeem the whole. What's beyond that? What pertains more closely to the whole person rather than the part? What constitutes the ultimate sacrifice for the gain of the ultimate prize? It's a close race between child and self. The sacrifice of the mother entering her child to the world is exemplified profoundly by Michelangelo's great sculpture, the Pieta, illustrated at the beginning of this chapter. Michelangelo crafted Mary contemplating her son crucified and ruined. It's her fault. It was through her that he entered the world and its great drama of being. It is right to bring a baby into this terrible world. Is it right to bring a baby into this terrible world? Every woman asks herself that question. Some say no, and they have their reasons. Many say yes voluntarily, knowing full well what's to come, as do all mothers, if they allow themselves to see. It's an act of supreme courage, with undertaking voluntarily. In turn, Mary's son, Christ, offers himself to God and the world, to betrayal, torture, and death. To the very point of despair on the cross, which he cries out those terrible words, my God, why hast thou forsaken me?" Matthew chapter 27, verse 46. That is the archetypal story of a man who gives his all for the sake of the better, who offers up his life for the advancement of being, who allows God's will to become manifest fully within the confines of a single mortal life. This is the model for an honorable man. In Christ's case, however, as he sacrifices himself, God, his Father, is simultaneously sacrificing his Son. It is for this reason that the Christian sacrificial drama of Son and Self is archetypical. It's a story at the limit where nothing more with nothing more extreme, nothing greater can be imagined. That's the very definition of archetypical. That's the core of what constitutes religion. Pain and suffering define the world. Of that there can be no doubt. Sacrifices can hold pain and suffering in abeyance in greater or lesser degree, and greater sacrifices can do that more effectively than lesser. Of that there can be no doubt. Everyone holds this knowledge to their soul. Thus the person who wishes to alleviate suffering, who wishes to rectify the flaws of being, who wants to bring about the best of all possible futures, who wants to create heaven on earth, will make the greatest of sacrifices of self and child, of everything that is loved, to live a little life aimed at the good. He will forego expediency. He will pursue the path of ultimate meaning, and he will, in that manner, bring salvation to the ever-desperate world. But is such a thing even possible? Is that something just not asking too much of the individual? It's all well and good for Christ, it might be objected, but he was the versatile Son of God. But we do other examples, such much less mythologized and archetypical. Consider, for example, the case of Socrates, the ancient Greek philosopher. After a lifetime of seeking the truth and educating his countrymen, Socrates faced a trial for crimes against the city-state of Athens, his hometown. His accusers provided him with plenty of opportunities to simply leave and avoid the trouble, but the great sage had already considered and rejected this course of action. His companion, Hermogenes, observed him at this time discussing any and every subject, other than his trial, and asked him why he appeared so unconcerned. Socrates first answered that he had been preparing his whole life to defend himself, but then said something more mysterious and significant. When he attempted to specifically to consider strategies that would produce acquittal by fair means or foul, or even when merely considering his potential actions at the trial, he found himself interrupted by his divine sign, his internal spirit, voice of Damien. Socrates discussed the voice of the trial itself. He said that one of the factors distinguishing him from other men was his absolute willingness to listen to its warnings, to stop speaking and cease acting when it objected. The gods themselves had deemed him wise above other men, not least for this reason, according to Delphic oracle, held to be a reliable judge of such things. I didn't know this about Socrates. It makes me like him more. Because his ever-reliable internal voice objected to fleeing or even to defending himself, Socrates radically altered his view of the significance of his trial. He began to consider that it might be a blessing rather than a curse. He told Hermogenes of his realization that the spirit to whom he had always listened might be offering him a way out of life in a manner easiest but also the least irksome to one's friends, with sound body and a spirit capable of showing kindness, and absent throes of illness and vexations of extreme old age. Socrates' decision to accept his fate allowed him to put away mortal terror in the face of death itself. Prior to and during the trial, after the sentence was handed down, and even later during his execution, he saw that his life had been so rich and full that he could let it go gracefully. He was given the opportunity to put his affairs in order. He saw that he could escape the terrible slow degeneration of the advancing years. He came to understand all that was happening to him as a gift from the gods. He was not therefore required to defend himself against his accusers, at least not with the aim of pronouncing his innocence and escaping his fate. Instead, he turned the tables, addressing his judges in a manner that makes the reader understand precisely why the town council wanted this man dead. Then he took his poison like a man. Socrates rejected expediency and the necessity for manipulation that accompanied it. He chose instead, under the direst of conditions, to maintain in pursuit of the meaningful and of the true. 2,500 years later, we remember his decision and take comfort from it. What can we learn from this? If you cease to utter falsehoods and live according to that dictates of your conscience, you can maintain your nobility, even when facing the ultimate threat. If you abide truthfully and courageously by the highest of ideals, you will be provided with more security and strength that will be offered by any short-sighted concentration of your own safety. If you live properly, fully, you can discover meaning so profound that it protects even from the fear of death. Could all that possibly be true? That's awesome. That was from Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules of Life. That's really a great way to thinking. I kind of got goosebumps there. Because, you really want to, all you got is yourself sometimes. And all Socrates had was himself. And at the end of his life, when all these accusers were just, his hometown of Athens were just pulling things out of their, talking smack to him, he was just like, fine, say whatever. And he got a chance to die with dignity and put all his affairs in order. And they weren't even worth arguing with. And he saw his trial and his imprisonment as a blessing. And he just stuck his finger at the system. That was from rule number 7. That section was called Delay of Gratification. The title of rule number 7 is Pursue what is meaningful, not what is expedient. So, pursue what is meaningful, not just the quick fix. And that's a really important lesson to learn. If you liked my reading, click the thumbs up button. If you haven't already, hit the subscribe button. And have a good day.